claimed that he took Lafitte down there, and Lafitte dug up something, and he got 5 golden coins. Now, that was at Money Hill. But I've got the book. I didn't look it up.
I think it's Lafayette.
Is it Lafayette?
It's Lafayette.
Is it?
I'm gonna tell you something about these bouillons. They're stories and ghosts.
Hey, I'm ready.
Elmo or Johnny one, he come running Turk Wheel one time. All the drunks was in there. Said there's a big old dragon on the beach. There's a big old dragon on the beach. And nobody paid attention. He said, I swear to God there's a dragon. They all jumped in old cars, whatever they had, probably Model 8. They went down there, sure enough, there's a big old dragon. His leash was like that with their headlights. Somebody got brave enough to walk up there, and it was a damn tree that's floated up there. It did have a head look like a dragon, and had them leaves still on it. I said, it didn't run in by the time it went all the way down there looking at that damn dragon. Well, they said it did kind of look like a dragon.
What kind of dancing did you do? Yeah, I wouldn't think break dancing.
no swing. I guess you could say swing.
No, no,
And jitterbug.
Jitterbug and
Annie Mae Sims taught us all how to jitterbug.
Yeah.
Annie Mae Sims also taught us all how to swim.
That's right. She taught all my kids how to swim.
And how to rope skate.
Yeah.
They ride
Down
this
in the old
past
cement
roller
slab.
skating days.
yeah. You talked about the horses and the cows that hung out by the schoolhouse to chase us home every day. I went the opposite direction that Haroline went down, and we had to get at least over to the road where the old ice plant used to be to get away from the cows. And then there was also an old cement building over there that had all the windows knocked out, and if we got that far, we could jump inside that building and get away from them that way. But it was all quite an experience and a lot of fun, and something to talk about the next day at school. Who got chased by Gotcha that day?
And our folks had a car, but they wouldn't take us to school and make us walk, even knowing we were scared to death.
It didn't kill you. It made you stronger.
We did. Well, actually, Lakita's dad criticized me one time for always walking with my head down. And I said, well, you know, I have walked cow trails all my life, watching for cow patties, doodle bugs, snakes, whatever you had to jump over. So yes, I do walk with my head down, watching where I put my feet.
Lakita,
Yes.
what year was your son, not Mark, the
Hans.
other one born?
Hans. He was born
Yeah, but
in.
that's not what you called him.
Crockett.
Oh, David. David Crockett. He was born in ¡55.
And that's when David Crockett moved.
Right.
But they were gonna have a little girl.
Davy Crockett and Daniel Boone were born the same week, and they both made the newspaper. And so I called the mother of Daniel Boone. They really were related to the Boones down through the line. But I thought my David was going to be a girl, so I told the other kids they could name him. And of course, Davy Crockett was real popular. So.
And now he's a cosmetic surgeon.
Oh, and
No.
But here I am, yeah, he is.
And I still think of him as David Crockett.
He just says that's a family name and just puts C down. You can't read his signature anyhow, so he gets away with it. He's an otolaryngologist. Now wrap your tongue around that one.
Andy, you remember Buck Gillen?
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Buck Gillen used to light his trash. He'd carry his trash off from the Spanish village, put it in a trailer,
Yeah.
and he'd light it, and he'd drive down there to the bar and go in the bar.
Let it burn.
And the trash would be burning.
When my kids were little, Buck Gillen, I'll swear, if he weighed 100 pounds soaking wet, I'd be surprised. And he had a real high, skinny voice. And they got him to play Santa Claus one year. That was hilarious. He didn't pat himself, but he would, you know, that real high, squeaky voice and skinny little legs. And I have painted a picture of him a lot of times in the oil paints as a toe painter. and I've sold a lot of them. But I make the hair stick out through the leggings and
You know, he was the only one that could go down on the beach after dark during the war. But,
Well, he lived down at the
Carpus Pass.
Carpus Pass.
yeah, he could go anywhere. He was the only one that could do that. And, you know, he'd get all wound up on that beer once in a while.
When I was going to college, going to A&I in Kingsville, I drove, the last 2 years anyway, Mackie Moore was going to school at A&I too. And we always drove the beach. We did not go in to take the causeway and go into Corpus and go to school that way. We drove that beach, hooked on down at the Kennedy Causeway, and got on across to Corpus and then drove through the Chapman Ranch. And we also, let's see, Nona and I and Mackie were invited to go to a dance at the naval base. A friend of mine, a Navy boy that I was dating, George Blaine, had invited us to go to a dance at the naval base. And so we took off in Aunt Dodie's car. And Mackie ran across a big log and it ruined the wheel. And we couldn't go any farther. And we were wondering, what are we going to do? And I said, well, let's just wait. You know that Buck Gilliland's going to show up any minute. And as I had predicted, here came Buck Gilliland in his old truck. So Nona, Mackie, and I got in the truck with him, and Nona had to straddle the gear stick and hold that truck in gear. It wouldn't stay in gear unless you held it there. So we made it back up to the island, and I don't remember whose car we got then, probably my little Morris Minor, and we went back down that beach and went to the dance. And after the dance, we went over to a service station that was by the Bascule Bridge, bought a new wheel, went back through down to Padre Island and up that beach again to find to pick up Uncle Bill and Dodie's car. And Mackie switched the wheel out, and then we finally got to go home. I think it was probably just about sunup by the time we got home. And the next morning, Uncle Bill went out and got in his car and started backing out, and then he stopped and he went in the house and said, Dode, what the hell is the matter with that car? And of course Dodie didn't know, but she kept her mouth shut because she figured it had something to do with Mackie. Right?
Yeah.
this really doesn't have anything to do with Port Aransas, but I always think of Manny. I didn't get to go very many places back at this time because I had 2 little kids, no car, but my mother and dad happened to be down here, so they said they would babysit. Manny and I went into Corpus to a movie, Uncle Tom's Cabin. We got in there and sat down, and we waited and we waited. The movie was going, but there was no sound. And finally we looked at each other, oh my God, it's a silent movie. My one night out, and I go see a silent movie. We should have picked better.
That's kind of luck we always have.
Yeah. Do you think we were behind the door when they passed out the brains?
Now, Uncle Teddy was from here, but where did Aunt Berta's people come from, the Marcys?
They came from Kansas, and before that from out of Canada, the French part of the family. They come out of Canada and...
Grandma Marcy's family came from Missouri.
Yeah.
And what brought them down here?
The Marcys?
Yeah.
My mama had a boyfriend named Edwin, and she and her boyfriend had split up, and she was kind of lost in, and she'd gone to California already, and then some friends asked her to come to Texas with them because they wanted her to take care of their children while they opened a restaurant. And so she came as a nanny to take care of their kids. And she started working on the waterfront in the restaurant that was owned by Dodie Moore, my dad's sister Dora. And she'd gone to a dance one night, and she met my dad at the dance, and he was working on a tugboat. And just a couple of weeks before this, Dodie burned the house down by trying to smoke out mosquitoes with oil rags in a can, and caught the house on fire. So when the night that Mama met Dad, he had come off the tugboat, and it was all cleaned up, and he had washed his clothes on the tugboat and dried them in the boiler room. And they were really wrinkled. Well, Dad was pretty strong, and I know if he wrung those things out, he did a good job. And so anyway, they danced and fell in love, and so that's why Mama stayed here, was to marry Teddy Matthews. And while she was working in that restaurant, she said this great big old man came in there, and she said, I'd never seen hands. And he looked at me and he said, you marry my son D.T., and you marry the old man too. And she said, I was scared to death. I didn't know what he meant. But she did move into the same house with Grandpa and with Aunt Jessie and Uncle Johnny. All of them lived together in one house.
Yeah, I'd like to know how many rooms were in that little red schoolhouse and what a graduating class consisted of as far as numbers.
The last real graduating class from here were two girls, Catherine Teller and Tiny Mercer. And that was back in 40.
Okay, that's when they had a high school here.
That's when they had a high school here. So there were two girls that year.
But then the little red one had
4 rooms.
4 rooms, a gymnasium.
But there was
Yeah.
the auditorium,
It had an auditorium.
Not when I was there. They added all that stuff on later. But when I was a little kid, there were 4 rooms. And yes, there were 2 bathrooms. And Mama didn't tell me that there would be 2 bathrooms at school. One for the boys and one for the girls. So Buddy Mercer caught me in the boys' restroom, and he explained to me that there was a difference and that I should be using the other bathroom down at the other end of the hall. Then later they built on the auditorium and a stage. But the stage where Manny and I sang and played in Black Sambo was a little wooden stage, and 2 of the rooms were end to end, and there was a great big wall there that could be rolled up to the ceiling, and then that made like a big auditorium. And we were on the little stage there and singing the parts of Little Black Sambo.
Anyhow, as far as the building went, there were 4 rooms, just a hall down the middle, with 2 rooms off each end of the hall, restroom at each end of the hall, and some water fountains, and a place. It was built up kind of on piers, and we discovered that what you could do there was throw your books under there and tell the teacher you lost your books. So anyhow, but that was our schoolhouse.
And a class was probably anywhere from what, 6 to 10 kids?
No.
There what?
The year that I started the school, we had 3 grades to a room. First, second, and third grade, and my class, my grade had 7 kids in it, and then that was one of the bigger classes, but probably the whole room didn't have more than 15 kids in it.
Well, I've always told everybody that it took every kid in the school to make enough kids to play baseball.
Yeah, that's true.
And that Eva Mercer and I were the littlest kids, and nobody wanted us on their team because we were not any good. And so they would choose up sides, and I was the last one to get chosen. And so Eva and I would beg and plead to be allowed to clean the restrooms instead of going to PE. So we kept the girls' restroom clean, and we swept the rooms because we had no janitors then, so it was up to the kids. Anyway, the reason why I decided to become a school teacher is sitting right there in front of me, one of the guys Bill Sims and Bill Smith were the cutest little boys you ever saw. And I was maybe y'all remember that I had to come to school about half a day, and Ms. Gibbs taught me, and I'd sit in there in that classroom, and I got the biggest kick out of those little boys. So I decided I wanted to teach school when I grew up.
Anyway, I was in grade school over here, and Haroline was in high school over there in Ranges Pass, and I was about, well, I'm 4 years behind Haroline, so if say she was a sophomore, I would have been in the 7th grade, right?
Right.
Yeah, and I wanted this BB gun real bad, and you remember Lax down at the end down there?
Yeah.
Lax sold BB guns, and I saved up my money and everything, and I think it cost $4.58, something like that. And so I had $4.58, and I rode the bus over that was going to bring them back, see, from school. You could see the ground through the bus. The floorboard was all rotted out and rusted out and everything. And I rode the bus over after school. I rode the bus over right quick. Went over and I ran down to Lax and went in there to get this BB gun, and I lacked something like 3 cents of having enough to get this BB gun. So that meant I was going to have to go all the way home and maybe, you know, and wait and come back another day. So here I am, I'm coming back, and the bus station was down there, I don't know what's the name of that, down there by Commercial Motors, just this side of Commercial Motors. And here I am, this little kid, and Haroline said, "Billy, what are you doing here?" And I told her the story, you know, because they were all getting on the bus, all these high school kids. And told her the story, and I said, I only lacked 4 or 5 cents of buying this BB gun. She said, "My God!" And the bus drivers they were getting ready to leave, and she goes around and she gets a lot more than what I need from all the kids, you know, from their lunch money. She said, "Give me some money for Billy so he go get a BB gun." So, boy, they all, Donna Roy and all them, they threw in a couple of pennies. Heck, I had more money than one. Man, and the bus driver said he was fixing to leave. And Haroline made him stay and wait till I ran down to Lax, got this BB gun, and come back. Then she let the bus driver go.
And that old bus did the holes that he was talking about. You could see the ground as you drove by. Also, you had to hold your feet up when it was raining, or the rain splashed in and feet wet. So I'd sit on my feet going to school.
Y'all didn't have safety belts either.
Oh no.
No. Stay there where you are.